in the shadowed folds of a forgotten mountain range, where the mist clings like a shroud and the trees whisper secrets in tongues. Older than memory, there lay a village so isolated that even the maps dared not name it. Its name, lost to time, was spoken only in fearful murmurs in neighboring hamlets, as though to utter it aloud might summon the darkness that had claimed it. This was a place where the living and the dead shared a boundary so thin that it seemed woven from the size of the earth itself. Here, each year, when the harvest moon rose blood-red over the jagged peaks, the villagers gathered to enact a ritual both ancient and dreadful, a festival of living burials. To understand this ceremony is to step into a world where desperation and devotion entwined like thorn and rose. The village, though small, was gripped by a curse whispered down through generations, that the earth beneath them thirsted not for crops but for souls. This hunger was no mere superstition, but a truth as palpable as the cold bite of the mountain air. The festival was born from that fear, a pact carved into the marrow of the village's history. It was said that each year, a chosen few would be buried alive in the communal crypt, their survival or death a sacred offering to stave off ruin. These living tombs were not punishments, but a covenant painful, terrifying, and yet embraced with a solemn reverence that defied understanding. The story of the festival begins with the village elder Matteo, a man whose eyes held the weight of centuries and whose voice carried the cadence of old prayers. Matteo was a man torn by faith and fear, a custodian of tradition burdened by the knowledge that each festival demanded a sacrifice not just of flesh, but of hope itself. His daughter, Isala, had been born under the waning moon, her pale skin and restless spirit marking her as both cursed and chosen. From her earliest days, the villagers whispered that she bore the village's fate within her fragile frame, a living symbol of the fragile balance between life and death that sustained them all. As the festival approached, the air thickened with a tension that seeped into bones and dreams alike. Preparations began in silence, save for the clatter of stone chisels and the low chanting of prayers meant to soothe the restless earth. The crypt was reopened, its entrance hewn anew with symbols of protection and warning, each mark a plea to the spirits below. Isala, though only 16, understood the gravity of the coming night. She had watched others enter the crypt before her friends, neighbors, and strangers, each swallowed by the cold earth, each holding a fragile thread between existence and oblivion. On the eve of the festival, beneath a sky bruised purple with gathering clouds, the village gathered around the ancient stone altar at the heart of the square. Matteo spoke of duty, of sacrifice, and of the fragile mercy the earth granted them in exchange for their offerings. His words were a bomb and a blade, weaving hope and dread into a tapestry as complex and dark as the mountains themselves. The chosen were named those who would descend into the living tombs, selected not by cruelty, but by a lottery steeped in superstition and resignation. Among them was Isala's closest friend, a boy named Lucian, whose laughter once had filled the meadows, but now was muted beneath the shadow of the festival. As torches flickered against the gathering dusk, the procession moved toward the crypt, a parade of whispered prayers and stifled sobs. The living tombs awaited narrow chambers carved deep into the rock, their walls lined with ancient bones and inscriptions promising peace to those who would sleep beneath the soil. The air inside the crypt was thick with earth and memory, a suffocating embrace that promised both death and salvation. Lucian's final smile, fragile and fearful, lingered in the fading light as the heavy stones were sealed above him, a barrier between the living and the dead, between hope and despair. Isala, left behind in the trembling silence of the village square, felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories pressing down upon her. She wondered if the festival was truly a protection or a curse disguised as tradition. Her heart was a battleground where love, fear, and the desperate desire to break the cycle warred with one another. Yet even as doubt gnawed at her soul, she knew that the earth's hunger was not so easily denied. The festival was not merely a ritual, it was the village's grim covenant with survival, a pact sealed in living flesh and trembling hearts. And so, beneath the watchful gaze of the blood moon, the village waited, caught between the pulse of life above and the silent breath of death below. The festival of living burials had begun, and with it, the fragile thread of hope that bound the village would be tested against the dark heart of the earth itself. As the first tendrils of dawn fractured the bruised sky, the village remained suspended in a fragile stillness, a silence so deep it seemed the world itself held its breath. Inside the crypt, Lucian lay in the narrow stone chamber, the cold pressing against his skin like the weight of the grave itself. The air was thick and stale, tinged with the faint scent of earth and the ancient bones that lined the walls, a macabre testament to those who had come before him. Swallowed by this living tomb, the faint pulse of his heartbeat echoed in his ears, a desperate rhythm in the suffocating dark. Outside, the villagers moved through their days with a hollow semblance of normalcy. Faces once familiar were now etched with lines carved by sleepless nights and quiet despair. Matteo's eyes, heavy with the knowledge of the terrible bargain he upheld, watched over them like a sentinel guarding a doomed kingdom. The festival was more than a tradition. It was a blade that sliced through the very soul of the village, severing hope, and replacing it with an unspoken dread that clung like a poison. Isola, consumed by a growing storm within, refused to surrender to the numbing ritual of acceptance. Each passing hour deepened her resolve to confront the curse that chained them to this cycle of living death. She wandered to the edge of the village, where the forest's black fingers reached hungrily towards the flickering homes. And there she found herself entangled in memories, whispers of laughter shared with Lucien in sun-dappled meadows, the innocent dreams of youth now eclipsed by the shadow of the festival. Her footsteps carried her to the ancient stone circle, a place where the village's oldest prayers were carved into weathered rock. It was said the circle held the power to bridge worlds, to commune with forces both benevolent and malevolent. Desperation lent Isola courage, and with trembling hands she traced the faded glyphs, murmuring prayers learned in secret from the village's oldest texts, words meant to summon mercy, to unravel the darkness that had claimed them. Meanwhile, beneath the soil, Lucien fought the encroaching darkness. His mind wove between reality and dream, memories mingling with a creeping madness born of isolation and the choking cold. The bones around him whispered secrets, and in the depths of his fear, he imagined faces, some kind, some cruel, watching from the shadows. He clung to a single thought, the hope that above ground, someone still remembered him, that his breath was not yet snuffed out by this earthbound prison. Back in the village, Matteo convened a council of elders beneath the flickering glow of candlelight. Their faces, carved by grief and guilt, betrayed the cracks in their stoic facade. They debated the festival's necessity with a somber gravity, their voices hushed and heavy with unspoken fears. Some spoke of breaking the cycle, of seeking new paths beyond blood and soil. But tradition's grip was ironclad. To defy the festival was to invite ruin, the withering of crops, the sickness of children, the suffocating wrath of the mountain itself. Isola, hearing their words from the shadows, felt a surge of defiance ignite within her. She knew the true horror was not merely in the living burials, but in the silence that had grown around them, the complicity born of fear, the sacrifice of morality to superstition. That night, beneath the shroud of stars, she vowed to unravel the darkness, to breathe life into the forgotten, and to confront the earth's hunger with fire instead of fear. But the earth was patient, and its hunger eternal. As the moon climbed once more into the ink-black sky, the village's fragile hope would be tested against forces older than memory. The festival was not just a ceremony. It was a sentence, a cycle of sacrifice and survival etched deep into the bones of the village, and the cost of breaking it might be more than any of them were prepared to pay. The night grew thick and suffocating, draping the village in a cloak of silence so heavy it pressed against the skin like a living thing. Isola, restless and haunted, wandered through the empty streets, each footfall echoing with the weight of 1,000 whispered fears. The air was electric with the unspoken, the shadows lengthening like fingers reaching to silence the fragile hopes that dared to flicker. Her thoughts churned with the bitter knowledge that the festival's chains were woven not only from fear of the earth's hunger, but from the darker threads of human despair and complicity. Deep within the crypt, Lucien's breaths grew shallow, the darkness tightening its grip as hours bled into endless nights. His mind, a fragile tether between reality and oblivion, conjured visions of the village faces twisted by grief, hands raised in silent prayers, and a single figure, pale and resolute, standing against the tide of tradition. It was Isola, the beacon in his suffocating night, the spark of defiance that whispered promises of salvation. But salvation was a cruel mirage. The crypt's cold embrace was relentless, and time itself seemed to decay within those stone walls. Back above, Matteo wrestled with his own tormentor, man burdened by the cruel mantle of leadership, torn between the preservation of his people and the unbearable cost of their survival. Each year, As the festival dawned, he felt the sting of betrayal of self, of village of the fragile humanity buried beneath layers of ritual and necessity. His daughter's rebellion was both a beacon and a blight, illuminating paths of hope, yet threatening to unravel the fragile order that held their world together. Isola's journey led her beyond the village borders, into the heart of the forbidding forest, where ancient trees stood sentinel over secrets older than time. Here, in the tangled undergrowth and whispering shadows, she sought the remnants of forgotten knowledge, herbal lore, rites of protection, and forbidden prayers whispered by women whose names had been erased by history. She gathered roots and bark, crafting potions and charms in the flickering light of a hidden hearth, her hands steady despite the tremor of fear that coursed beneath her skin. Yet, even as she armed herself with knowledge and resolve, the festival's grip tightened. The village, torn between hope and despair, teetered on the edge of collapse. Families fractured beneath the weight of loss. Friendships cracked like brittle bones under the strain of secrets and silence. Matteo's counsel grew fractious, voices raised in anger and desperation, old wounds reopened by the specter of change. One evening, as storm clouds gathered and thunder rumbled like the growl of some ancient beast, Isola confronted her father beneath the gnarled branches of the sacred oak. Their words were sharp and raw, clash of love and fear, tradition and rebellion, duty and desire. Matteo's eyes, once filled with the certainty of conviction, now shimmered with the uncertainty of a man who had begun to question the very foundations of his world. Isola, fierce and unyielding, vowed to break the cycle, to bring light where darkness had reigned for centuries. But defiance invited retribution. The earth itself seemed to respond to her vow, winds howling through the village like mournful wails, the soil trembling beneath trembling feet. The festival's shadows lengthened, creeping into every corner of the village, reminding all who dwelled there that some pacts, once forged, were not easily broken. And as the blood-red moon rose once more, the village braced for a reckoning that would test the limits of courage, love, and survival. In the cold depths of the crypt, Lucian's spirit flickered like a candle, struggling against the draft of oblivion. Above ground, Isola's fire burned fierce, a desperate light fighting against the gathering darkness. Between them stretched a chasm carved by fear and hope, a chasm that might swallow them both, or bridge the worlds of the living and the dead. The festival's end was near, but its true price remained hidden beneath layers of earth, blood, and silence, a price that would soon be paid in full. The final night descended like a shroud, draping the village in shadows deeper than any before. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and the bitter tang of fear. Fires flickered dimly in hearths, their weak light doing little to chase away the oppressive darkness that seemed to seep from the very ground. The festival's end loomed, a moment both dreaded and awaited, a culmination of pain, sacrifice, and a hope as fragile as a spider's silk. Isola stood at the edge of the village square, the faces of those around her blurred by tears and exhaustion. The elders moved with a solemn grace, preparing the final rites with hands trembling beneath the weight of centuries. Matteo, once a pillar of certainty, now bore the hollow gaze of a man undone, his spirit fractured by the relentless toll of tradition and the fierce love for his daughter who dared to defy it. Beneath the earth, Lucian's breath was a shallow whisper, his body frail yet alive, clinging to the thread of existence that Isola's rebellion had kindled. The cold stone that confined him felt less like a prison now, and more like a womb of transformation, his fate intertwined with the village's own, suspended between death and a desperate yearning for rebirth. As the hour approached, a hush fell over the crowd. The elders intoned the ancient chants, voices rising and falling like the restless tide, weaving a tapestry of sound that reached deep into the soul. Isola stepped forward, her heart pounding, the weight of generations pressing upon her. She raised her hands, not in submission but in defiance, calling forth the forgotten prayers of those who had long been silenced. The earth trembled, a low rumble that echoed through the bones of the village. From the crypt, a faint light shimmered, a beacon against the suffocating darkness. The villagers gasped as the stone doors, long sealed, began to shift, revealing Lucian's pale form alive, fragile and reborn from the depths of despair. In that moment, the festival's grip faltered, the chains of fear and silence beginning to shatter. The villagers, once bound by a ritual of sacrifice, now glimpsed the possibility of a new dawn of future, where hope might bloom from the ashes of tradition. Matteo's eyes met Isola's, a a silent understanding passing between them, a promise to rebuild what had been broken. Yet, the scars of the past lingered like shadows in the twilight. The festival's dark legacy would not be forgotten, its echoes etched forever into the hearts of those who survived. But in the breaking of the cycle, the village found a fragile salvation ember of light in a world too long consumed by darkness. As dawn broke over the hills, washing the village in pale gold, Isola and Lucian stood together, their faces turned toward the rising sun. The earth beneath them was still rich with the memories of the lost, but now it held the promise of life, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. Even in the face of the darkest of nights,